computer. By the way, thank you last week for your presentations. That was wonderful. The way you folks just kind of took the ball and ran with it. I've never given an assignment like this who has in these circumstances. And I just appreciate all the work that you put in. I'm really looking forward to what you're going to be doing with the To Your Good Health assignment. And again, if you have any questions and want to talk about it, let's talk. Okay. Open. Okay, so today, please open your poll app. Then we'll have current events and discussion questions. We're talking about water and electrolytes. Then next class, we'll be doing minerals, bone health, and iron. Your diet and wellness projects will be due. And as always, we'll have discussion questions. Next Monday, there won't be class. There will be you making time to work on your presentations. Okay, so that class time is set aside for y'all to get together and put the final touches. Please look at the rubric. Please make sure you're covering. I will be available. I'll send out an announcement to let you know that I'll be online, because what else am I doing? If you have any questions, anything that I can help you with, and then Wednesday will be the presentations. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Professor, I have a question.
Please.
My poll everywhere is making me put my name again, but I don't remember your format, the one that you requested.
What do you mean? Like, oh, last name, first initial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You never had to register, by the way. You just have to click each time there's a question that says skip it. Are you in, Yael? Okay, good. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Which of the following is not an electrolyte? Zinc, chloride, potassium, or sodium? Which of the following is not an electrolyte? Oh, no, we're not supposed to see. Good morning. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Zinc is not an electrolyte. That's what I did my graduate research on, but it's not an electrolyte. Electrolytes are salts that dissolve in water and can dissociate or break apart into charged particles called ions. The 3 major electrolytes that we looked at are sodium and potassium that are positively charged. Positively charged ions are called cations. And chloride, which is negatively charged, and negatively charged ions are called anions. Electrolytes are involved in fluid and water balance and acid-base balance. And one of the discussion questions that whoever is put in that group is about how vomiting can cause a condition called alkalosis, which is an excess of, well, we'll find out. Hyponatremia refers to not having enough water inside the cell. Hyponatremia refers to not having enough water inside the cell. True or false? Five, four, oops, 3, 2, 1. All right, that is false. So hyponatremia is also known as water intoxication. It's rare. It usually occurs from forced water intake. It's associated with low blood levels of sodium, low levels in the blood, not within the cell. And with heavy exercise, you should replace both water and electrolytes. So this is something that we didn't talk about much when we talked about fitness. I don't remember, it was a while ago. But hyponatremia is something that can occur. Wait, let me see if it's in my next slide. Oh, okay. Let me just go over this, and then I want to talk about hyponatremia and athletes. Let me write it down so I remember. So we have water and electrolytes and proteins inside the cell. We have water and electrolytes and protein outside the cell. And the ones that are inside the cell, when we talk, for example, about kwashiorkor, the proteins inside the cell keep water in the cell. The proteins outside the cell keep water outside the cell. And one of the things that happens with kwashiorkor or severe protein deficiency is that when that protein is being broken down for energy, which is not what we want to use protein for, but in these circumstances, that's what happens, then there's nothing holding that water inside this, inside the cell. And so what happens is it leaks into the outside or extracellular space. And that's what causes edema. Now, we also have electrolytes inside the cell. The major intra, meaning within the cell, intracellular electrolyte is potassium, and it helps keep fluid inside the cell. The major extracellular electrolyte is sodium and chloride. If you've ever bitten your lip or your tongue, have you ever tasted, has it ever tasted weird? Like if you bit your lip or your tongue, what do you taste? Has anybody ever tasted? Whoops. Just call out because I don't have my other laptop, so I can't see hands.
It's a little salty.
Exactly. It's a little salty. That's the sodium and the chloride in your blood. And blood is extracellular fluid. It's the fluid outside the cell. And so when you cut yourself or when you bite your tongue or your lip, well, what you're tasting is the sodium and chloride inside in the blood. Now, this is something, I don't think I had this in the video because I wasn't sure how to explain this. But what happens is, in order to maintain fluid balance, the water will go where the electrolytes go. And this is a concept called osmosis. I'm not going to go into detail with it because first of all, it's a difficult concept. And second of all, in the classroom, it's difficult. Doing it online is difficult. But when there is potassium inside the cell, the water wants to be there. When sodium and chloride outside the cell, that's where water wants to be. When there is an imbalance, the water wants to go to make sure that the electrolytes are distributed equally. With hyponatremia, has anybody, besides from what we talked about here, just, let's see, how do I want to ask this? So when I would talk about fitness in the past, I would talk about dehydration. We talked about dehydration, how you can become dehydrated when you're exercising and you stop sweating and because you've lost fluid. But what happens when you replace water and not electrolytes is that you develop, and I'm just going to go back a couple slides, this condition called hyponatremia. And I have Na in blue because it's sodium. You have too much water and not enough sodium in the blood. And that can be fatal. All right, that's the condition it says here, associated with low blood levels of sodium. It can cause edema in your central nervous system, your lungs become congested, your muscles become weak because you have created a fluid imbalance. And the reason why I added this to fitness, maybe not this year, because I wanted to talk about it here, is because what happens with what happens in like the last 10 years or so is that there was an increase in incidence of these cases of hyponatremia. People would be running in the marathon and they would be replacing fluids or the water, but not the sodium. And they would develop this imbalance of electrolytes and fluid in their bodies, and that can be fatal. So it's important when you are exercising at high intensity, when you are sweating a lot, that you don't just replace fluids, you don't just replace the water, but you replace the electrolytes. Do you need fancy beverages? Do you need Pedialyte? No, PEDI stands for pediatric. It's for children, it's not for adults. Dilute fruit juice, soda, as Nancy Clark would say, chocolate milk and French fries, those are sufficient to replace the electrolytes, the glucose, whatever your body needs. But it's important to maintain this fluid and electrolyte balance. So not just the water, but also the electrolytes. Does anybody have any memory of hearing about, what was it? It was some radio contest, We for a We. Does anybody still remember that, or have we aged out of that? We meaning you or me. Many years, I don't know how many years ago it was, there was some radio contest. There's a game. Is it still available? What is it? W-I-I, people play, anybody? So this radio contest, I guess it was called We for a We. I don't quite know the details because it was so horrendous. And a woman died because she wanted to win, and she drank so much water that her body couldn't process it. Now, little footnote, it had nothing to do with fluid and electrolytes. It had to do with the fact that she drank so much that her body couldn't process it effectively. But it had to do with, just you can have too much water. And I think I may have told you once, I had a student come into my class with a gallon of water and he put it down on his desk. And I said, don't you dare drink that whole thing in my class. You could die. So don't. I mean, you can have your coffee, you can have whatever, but you can have too much water. It's the dose. Let's see. Mild dehydration is not a serious condition and can easily be treated. True or false? Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is a case of a question that has an and if if there's an and in the middle of a true-false question, that means both sides of it have to be true. It can easily be treated, but in some cases, it is not a mild condition. I mean, it's not chronic mild dehydration, which means over a long period of time, all right? So if you're dehydrated for weeks at a time, these are some of the conditions that are associated with chronic meaning long-term, okay? At the beginning of the semester, we talked about the difference between acute and chronic takes time. Chronic dehydration can lead to these conditions. Now, your demographic is not, I would say, as much at risk as, say, mine. Or if you were sick for a long period of time, or, well, I'll talk about it in a second. But it is important to stay hydrated, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be drinking all the time. And we've looked at some of the instances when it's important to pay attention to hydration. If you are ill, if you are exercising in high temperatures or what's the opposite of humid? Dry. Because when you're exercising in dry conditions, you can't feel the sweat evaporating. All right, so, but over time, these are some of the conditions that can develop. And with aging, what happens is that people become less attuned to thirst. Plus, for some people, as they age, they are on medication, they may be bedbound, they may not be mobile, and they don't want to become, their fear incontinence. It's very embarrassing. They don't want somebody to have to clean up after them, and they would rather not drink than make sure that they stayed hydrated and risk this. So it is a concern, again, not necessarily with your demographic, as long as you know when it's important to stay hydrated. But it is a concern because these are some of the conditions that are associated with chronic dehydration. Which of the following is not a function of water? Helps regulate body temperature, regulates nutrient and waste products, maintains blood volume, provides energy for the body, which is not a function of water. Five, four, three, two, one. Okay. All right, so what does energy mean in our class? What do we mean by energy?
Calories.
Pardon?
Calories.
Calories, right, for our purposes. Let me just remind you, if you're putting something in the chat, I don't have my laptop with me right now, and I can't see it in this function of Zoom, so just call it out. Right, for our purposes, calories means energy, and we do not get any calories from water. So what water does is all these other things. Every reaction in our body requires enzymes, energy, and water. Okay. So water has all these reactions occurring. It's involved in energy formation because the reactions that provide energy in the form of ATP occur in water. It regulates nutrients and waste. It helps transport in the blood because our blood is mostly water. And so it helps bring nutrients to the cells. It helps remove waste products from the cells. It helps regulate body temperature. How does the fluid in our body, how does water regulate body temperature? What happens when our internal body temperature goes up? What do our bodies do in order to maintain normal body temperature? Jordan?
Sweat.
We sweat. What happens is that heat is transported in the blood to our extremities and it comes out through our pores. We sweat, and that helps bring the body temperature down to normal. That's why when we talked about fitness, when somebody is exercising but they stop sweating, if they continue to exercise, if their muscles are still contracting, if they're still using ATP, which is an inefficient process that releases heat, what's going to happen to that excess heat? It's going to increase inside the body. They're going to experience hyperthermia, an increase in blood, in temperature, and that can have disastrous effects on the body. Water also lubricates cushions, joints, eyes, spinal cord, and helps maintain fluid volume or blood volume. Major minerals are just as important as trace minerals, true or false? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so yeah, that's true. So what is the difference between major and trace minerals? Pepe.
Is it dependent on the amount in the body? So like major, there's just, I mean, it's
Could you say that again? I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry, we might have a problem with our connection this morning, my morning. Somebody else want to give it a, Vicky.
So, major minerals, the biggest difference is like the amount there is in reference to the body. So major minerals have more than 5 milligrams and trace minerals have less than 5 milligrams.
Okay, so that is one of the major differences.
is
that-
it just about the amount in your body? So like major, there's more of it.
Yes. I don't know what we're hearing. All right, so, and these are examples, the major minerals and the trace minerals. The only trace mineral we'll talk about is iron, but we'll talk about the minerals involved in bone health next class. The other difference, wait, let's see, what else do I have for you? Is that, what's the difference? Well, first of all, the minerals are referred to as, we need them in smaller amounts than our macronutrients. The same with vitamins. We need them in milligram or microgram amounts. That doesn't make them any less important. It just means, like you were saying, both of you, that we need them in smaller, they take up, it has to do with how much they are in our body, but also how much we need in our diet. So in terms of, for example, the trace minerals, we need much less of them than we do major minerals. Again, that has nothing to do with their importance or lack of importance. It has to do with how much we need in order for them to perform their functions in our body. Bottled water is often safer and more nutrient dense than tap water. True or false? And I guess I should add in the US because I can't speak for other places. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so for folks who said true, why do you think that bottled water is safer and more nutrient dense?
Well, I was confused by this one because
Okay.
I've heard it's safer. I wasn't sure about more nutrient dense though, because I know they do a lot of filtering to get it to the way to be safe, and that was kind of two questions in that I was.
I think in like the town that I'm from, like I used to be in a house where we had like a well, and like the water was considered safe to drink. But now like where I live, it's all like the town has told us like do not drink the water. So like we constantly either use Brita or we use like we just buy water, which is not really the most sustainable, but it like bottled water. And so that's why like when I saw safer, to me it was immediately true.
Then I'll throw this question out. I didn't realize that there were areas that were unsafe. What's wrong with the water?
I don't know. I think it's just like really old systems, and sometimes it can be discolored, and sometimes it can have, like they said, like deposits. I don't know if it's iron or what, but they like the levels were off. Like they sent like a letter home explaining it, but it's just like I know like nobody like in that area drinks the tap water.
Could you do me a favor if you get hold of that? Could you take a snapshot of it and send me the letter? Because there's a difference between like sometimes people, I don't know anything about it. I do know that water is supposed to be extremely safe. that our water is very safe. So I don't know if it's just that this is something that's happening now, or if it's because people don't like the way it looks, because sometimes people, just have it taste. They don't like the way water tastes. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it because it's tested.
Yeah,
but
no,
like-
this was like at least 8 or 9 years ago, but I know all of my friends, they usually just drink water from their fridge where it's been filtered.
Oh, okay. So they don't know that it's necessarily, there are times when things happen. I remember there was an incident in Newton where our reservoir, something happened in the reservoir and they were telling us to boil water for, 10 minutes. And people were flocking to the stores to buy bottled water. And I remember being so mad because the folks that should be getting the bottled water are the folks who can't go to the store and get it. Like what's wrong with boiling your water for 10 minutes? My point in asking this question had to do with many times, if you look at the label on your bottled water, you may see PWS on the label. PWS stands for
It's the same
public
thing.
water sources. It means that they've taken water from from a reservoir and they have put it through a Brita filter or they've done something with it, but it is not any safer. And the amount of minerals that are added to the water or the electrolytes or whatever they're trying to market it for are minor in relation to, again, the dose, the amount that you need. So this was my push for saying save resources, don't buy bottled water, because your water should be safe, which is why if you have any information on water that's not safe, I'd like to know about it. So what I'm trying to say is don't drink bottled water unless you have gotten a note that says your water's not safe. But I will throw this question out because there are instances when that happens. I should generally. Okay. Thank you.
Professor, I have
Yes.
a question.
Absolutely.
So I've heard and I've read that, for example, Aquafina, in the label it says it's purified water, and that's why it contains what you said. But for
Mhm.
example, Evian, I think Voss as well, or Fiji, they're like either glacier or spring waters, and they usually don't say they're purified water. So that's why I put true, because sometimes they do contain those minerals rather, like in comparison to Aquafina bottled water.
But in the amounts that your body needs, right? How much do you need? It's a marketing. And again, I'll throw it out because the question wasn't clear. So, but the amounts that are in the water are negligible in terms of what the body needs. It's a marketing. It's not, those things are present in the water. Glacial water, what they're doing is they're taking water from water sources. There's not anything magical about it. And what they're doing is wasting resources by bottling it and telling you there's something magical about it or something better about it. Now, I don't know what, you'll do what you do, but keep in mind that there's nothing inherently better unless there's something going on in where you live with the water. Okay, so I need to show my bias. I'm assuming that we're all getting water from areas that are generally considered safe. So, but thank you. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of current events, nobody signed up for today. So I'm going to go. And what I'm just going to do is answer some of the things that y'all posted. And thank you for continuing to post. Sasha, yes.
Professor, I did sign up.
Except for Alejandra, who signed up, and I apparently didn't see her name. So if you'll excuse me, whoops. Hello. Who else did I miss that I didn't see on the list? Please jump in. Let me get out of here for a sec so I can just see it on a bigger screen. Okay. Thank you. Go. What do you have?
Okay. So my current event was about vitamin A. It was discovered by the the Medical University in Vienna last week that vitamin A could help with the energy in the metabolism. So the way it's supposed to work is that you have two types of fat in your body, the brown fat and the white fat. The white fat is the fat that is in your abdomen, in your thighs, like mostly everywhere. And the brown fat is the one that you're supposed to burn when you need heat or energy. So the function of the vitamin A is to help transform the white fat into brown fat so that in the cold, you can use it to produce heat in your body. But this doesn't mean you need to take like a lot amount of vitamin A. Like you just have to eat normally. It doesn't work like you need to, like
And if you take more vitamin A, you'll burn more fat.
no, it doesn't work that way. You just need to take the normal amounts.
So let me ask, well, first, whenever I hear somebody talk about brown fat, in grad school, we called it brown adipose tissue. That's another name for it because adipose is another name for fat. And we call it bat fat. And it tends to be higher in mitochondria, which if you recall is the powerhouse of the cell. And that's where a lot of ATP are made during aerobic respiration. When they talked about vitamin A, were they referring to beta carotene or were they referring to retinol? Do you know which form of vitamin A they were referring to? Can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Let me check. But
Oh,
I think it just said vitamin A.
okay. Well, just so you all.
Oh, no, retinol binding protein.
Oh, retinol. Okay, so that's an animal form. Retinol refers to animal form. Okay. Did I miss anybody else who has signed up for current events? Anybody want to go? Any volunteers? Anyone? Anyone? All right. Let's see.
Professor, this doesn't have to do with current events, but Jackie and I, and maybe some of the people have a question. We're
Absolutely.
just a little unsure. We're all working on the diet and wellness project right now. We're a little unsure what you want submitted with it. Like, do you want the first sheet where we track what we eat at what time, or are you only looking, or do we exclude that, like diet analysis, and then only include the ones where we go through every food and like list what they have?
Okay, so while I have you all here, let's have a look, okay?
Yeah.
Because, let's see, I'm gonna move you all over and get out of this. I'm gonna try, and let me bring up Canvas so that we can all see, and then I'll share my screen because you don't need to see what I'm looking at. I'll be with you. I'm just logging in. And let me put on student view so I see what you see, because apparently we see different things. All right, let me share. Okay. Whoops. All right. Okay, so let's see. We're going to assignments. Instructions, documents, let's see. What you will turn in on the due date, okay? The diet and activity collection form, I want you to turn that in. So yes, I think that's what you were asking. And that one, if you want to just write it out by hand and take a snapshot and submit it, that's fine. Say, and then forms one for each day. All right, so that's where you put your calculations. That's where the data, form one is the data form. Then forms 2 through 5 and the discussion. Okay, so that's what you need to turn in. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah. So basically, like all the forms you listed, I compiled together in a Word doc. So you want all of them?
Yes, please.
All of them sent in. Okay. Yep.
Because what that does, let's say you tell me that your physical activity factor in your calculation for your expenditure is the highest one. I just want to look at, what you wrote down for your activity. You don't need to write down what you're doing every minute of the day. Just write down what you do for activity. Okay. And maybe I haven't told this class first, but usually what I do is everybody starts out with 100. Okay, and then I go through and I look at forms 2 and 3 and I look at the percentages. And if you have percentages that are way above 100% or way below 70%, then I go back and look at your data. I'm guessing that if your vitamin A, for example, is very high, that you probably had carrots or red peppers, or that it's coming from beta carotene. Remember, that's not toxic. I don't want you cutting back on your fruits and vegetables because they're providing you with a lot of vitamin A. So don't worry about that. But that's what I'll look at first, all right, because that's what I'm interested in. So I will go back, and that's why I want to see your data. Okay, so I'll look at that. I'll look at your calculations. I'll look at your answers to the questions. And what I ask you to do is take that document that has all the questions on it and answer the and then underneath it, so that I don't have, so that I see the questions as well as the answers on what you submit for your analysis. Now, some of these answers are just one number. How many grams of carbohydrate did you get? What percentage of your calories was that? So those are just, one number or one word answers. But then there are other things like, well, if your carbohydrates were less than the recommendations, what could you consume to bring your, to bring it up? Okay, I saw another hand. Yes, Alejandra.
I don't do much activities. Like most of my activities are just like doing homework and that. So how can I measure my how much calories I burned? Like
So when you're calculating your BMR, you calculate that, and then the physical activity factor, it's on that form. I think it's form 5. You take the lowest number. I think it's 1.2.
Okay. So I don't need to actually calculate, okay, I burned this amount of calories by sleeping and this by, okay.
Now listen, folks, we were supposed to, Wednesday, last week was the deadline to do this. Today was not the day to be going over it, but since there's a global apocalypse going on, we have to make considerations that other things might have taken up your mind, your brain space. So, okay, what other questions do you have?
Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
So for the submission, I'm sure that like when you submit stuff through Trinidad, it only lets you submit one document. How do we submit the rest of them?
I'm sorry. I don't know. But I have had some people submit. Who submitted already? Jordan, did you have any problems submitting? Oops.
No, I did not.
So how did you do it? Did you save it as a PDF? What did you do?
So I think what I did is I combined all of the documents into one and just submitted that. So there are like some programs online that allowed me to just kind of like put them into one document. Actually, I might have just copied and pasted the documents, the tables that, that's what I did. I copied and pasted the tables that I needed. It said in the write-up, include this table in the final document. I just copied the table and pasted it in the final write-up. So I just submitted one document on Turnitin.
So while usually I'm very picky about how things look, basically I would like things to be formatted correctly, but I will understand that if you don't have the proper page breaks, that's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions before I do my current events? Okay, thank you for asking. All right, so what did I want to share? Where am I? Whoops, let me make you folks small. Because I wanted to, there were some questions that on the Padlet. Thank you all for continuing to post. So Sasha, what can you tell me about inulin? What have you heard about inulin?
So I followed this woman on social media, and I know that's not the best source of.
No, but that's great. That's why you're supposed to submit these questions so that we can learn how to assess them.
And basically, she lives in Monaco. She's French, and she sells this. She sells a range of products that she swore like fixed her hormonal issues and her gut issues, and a lot of people. She has a lot of like people reviewing the product saying the same, like a bunch of testimonials. So I looked into it, and the reason that she thinks hers is the best is because it's made out of pure Jerusalem artichoke, her inulin. And she says that in the US, they don't regulate as much, so they add a lot of fillers, and that her product is like from Europe. And anyways, there's definitely a markup that goes along with that. But I always take probiotics, so I was curious. I wanted to buy her product, but I found a similar one that has also Jerusalem artichoke inulin, and it has a bunch of other things. So I'm trying it out, but I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the whole marketing and whatever. Like, do you think it's a scam or?
Yeah, I do. I think most of these things are scams. I think when she says to, you know, she's had an epiphany experience, which means it worked for her, so she thinks it should work for everybody else. Now, on the one hand, you know, she could be very altruistic and trying to help people, but she's also selling it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a red flag. Inulin is a prebiotic.
Yes.
Right? So it's a resistant starch that comes from Jerusalem artichokes. Green bananas also have prebiotics. And when we talked about prebiotics, there are a number of food sources are. Does it reduce bloat? Does it help restore gut bacteria? Show me the data and I can evaluate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know what to say. I'd rather people eat the foods that have inulin in them. There is a concern, and I haven't followed the research, that when you add something as a supplement, it doesn't work as efficiently as when you get it from the source. And this kind of, only because it fits my analogy, is like if you are getting calcium from milk as opposed to calcium from a supplement. When you drink milk, you get vitamin D, you get lactose, that all helps you to absorb calcium better. Whereas when you take a calcium supplement, it's straight calcium. So that's the concern with inulin, is that it's not more, that it's more bioavailable if you are consuming it from food.
Okay. Yeah. Thank
Now
you.
you're doing an N of 1, and if it works for you, it shouldn't hurt you. Whether or not you need to be doing it, I'm not your doctor. I hope it's not expensive, but you don't have to tell me.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Pepe, you've been doing strength training. I would say one way to assess, and I know we're having some problems hearing or the connection. I don't know what an in-body composition scanner is. I would say if your clothes feel better, if you feel better, you don't need a number from an external source to tell you whether or not you are increasing muscle mass. That's the problem with these things, is that they're not accurate. So are you increasing muscle mass? I don't know, but you have other ways of telling whether or not your muscle mass is increasing besides some body composition scanner. So keep doing what you're doing. If you like what you're doing, if you feel stronger, then I can't say if you're increasing muscle mass, but if your clothes feel different, if you feel different, if you're stronger objectively because you can increase your reps without feeling fatigue, then I would say you're stronger, and not to let this make you feel like you're not increasing your muscle mass. Does that make sense? Okay. And I'm very jealous besides that. But all right, Scarlett, is it true that green tea can help speed up metabolism? No, it's not. Green tea is a magical thing, and there's no magic. So drink green tea because you like it, because you like the way it tastes. When we hear these things that increase metabolism, they're talking about so you can burn more calories and lose body fat. There's no data to support it. There's anecdotes. Anecdotes are where you should start the research, not where you finish it. And the data doesn't support it. So green tea is something you should have because you like the way it tastes. Let's see.
I feel like on every wait, I know you're not supposed to follow them, but they're always talking about like matcha or like green tea and supplements. And I was just wondering if there was any truth to it.
Right, right. And isn't it interesting that you even want to ask? So that means you have doubt. And I feel like my job is done. So let's find out. I mean, we should look into it when we have spare time, which might be who knows. But yeah, this would be an interesting kind of thing. Like if maybe some year people will do that to your good health. What are some of these claims that are being made? And how do you find out? You're learning how to do the research. You're learning where to go. You're learning to ask the questions, and that's how it starts. And if you have to ask the question, just remember, if it sounds another pithy phrase I would like to burn into your brains, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Christy, I have always heard that it's calories in, calories out. How do items like 0 calories affect statements such as diet sodas? Like, why would they? Okay, I don't understand your question, Christy. If it's 0 calories, unless you are saying, well, this is 0 calories, so I can have 3 bags of chips instead of 1, you shouldn't. And
Well, because it's just like I feel like sometimes I'll be drinking, items that have 0 calories, and they'll just be they'll even feel sweeter than things that the regular Coke or like, and it's just like in my head, it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like, I don't know, I feel like I am like, I know you said we talked about it, and you said like you would have to drink 17 cans, a day to affect you, but it's just kind of crazy to believe that like all that sweetness isn't like harming my body, like.
oh, well, those are 2 different things. Is it
Okay.
harming my body or is it making me gain weight? And I would say, no, it's not harming your body. No, it's not making you gain weight because you're watching how much you eat, but there's something about it that's making you not feel good. So don't drink as much.
Yeah, it's just it causes me to be like super bloated, but I also think that's because I don't drink as much soda anyway. And so I think when I add that factor in and drink those, it's.
Well, people feel bloated, but bloating is part of our process of metabolizing, digesting, absorbing food. We have pathologized feeling full.
Mm-hmm.
And if you let your body do what it's supposed to do, it should work its way through your system. Don't think that feeling full is wrong.
Yeah.
It's part of what our bodies are supposed to do.
That's true.
Okay, so Sasha, your other question, is it true artificial sweeteners can harm good gut bacteria? What was the MyFitnessPal blog? What was the blog post about? How bad artificial sweeteners are?
Essentially, yes. I don't know where I think I found it in my email or something, but yeah, I've always kind of thought of artificial sweeteners as it's a good and a bad, because we don't really know the long-term health effects yet of these new ones like monk fruit or erythritol.
Well, we kind of do with the sugar alcohols. Yeah, those are the ones that can, for some people, cause bloating because they are an alcohol. And so they pull water into the gut.
Right. So I don't know. I'm always curious about reading things on them because I feel like people are very pro or very against. And I believe that there was a study linked in that article that showed that good bacteria in your gut was reduced when you consumed artificial sweeteners more often than not.
So what do you want to ask about that study? What else do you want to know about that study?
Well, I was just curious if you think like that's enough to prove that this is indeed the case, or do you think that we should look further into it, or that like is this really important to pay attention to?
And those are all good questions. I would want to know, where did they get their results from? Because how did they measure the good bacteria versus the bad bacteria? Was this study done in rats that they were then able to sacrifice, which is a nice way of saying kill, and then measure the actual bacteria? Did they measure the bacteria before they gave the rats the substitutes and then afterwards? So that's what I would want to know, how they did the study. And I would say, go back to what we said at the beginning, 2 or 3 sodas a day is fine. When you start drinking 10 or 12 of cups of coffee, artificial soda, real soda, that's a concern.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I would stick with. I don't know that we ever have the answer to anything, because the thing about science is all we're doing is waiting for one study that contradicts gravity, and then gravity's not true anymore. That's how science works. So we go with the best preponderance of evidence right now.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mylin, you wanted to know, is it true your immune system gets stronger if you eat unclean, dirty food such as street food? You mean off the street? What is street food?
Oh, like it's very popular in Asia where you have like your mom and pop shops like on the street. Like
Oh God. When you said unclean food, people have this thing about clean food being organic and this and that and the next thing. So I thought you meant, I think that people get sick from eating, street food because they don't live around there and they don't have the bacteria from that area. That's why people who are tourists get sick. because they don't have that's where gut bacteria makes a huge difference. Because you're in a different area and people who live there have it. Does it strengthen your immune system? I don't know anything. I don't think so. No.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Oh, I wanted to show you this before we break into, this was in the video. So I don't know what to tell you about how much caffeine is in your coffee, but here's a picture. Here's a table of different cups of different types of coffee and how much caffeine is in them. Keep in mind, it's recommended to stay under 400 milligrams a day. So this Death Wish thing, 8 ounces of that is a Death Wish. Okay. All right. So I have 6 questions, 6 groups of questions. What I'm going to do is divide you into 6 groups. Ooh, give you about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll come around and see how you're doing. And then the document, if you, I hope you can all access the document. If not, let me know and I'll see you in a bit. Oopsies. And let's have a look at group 2.
So, and it says to like take small sips if you can't really like take the full thing.
So what do you have, folks?
Right now, we're discussing the second part of the question with what to suggest to someone that can't keep drinking fluids. And so something we all found was they suggested that you should chew on ice strips, just as a way to kind of get more liquids down, or take smaller sips, or get an IV.
That's the worst case scenario. Yeah. So what?
This may not be optimal. This may not be optimal for you.
Oh, somebody has somebody. Okay, so what did you say? What was the question? Oh, okay. So what did you? Why do you think this can cause alkalosis? What is alkalosis? Oh, I told you what it was.
What we saw was that there was a loss of gastric secretions, and then something else that I was reading was it just reduces the hydrogen ions in our body, and the kidneys release bicarbonate.
So I'm guessing that you might not understand what all that means, right?
Yeah, it's a little confused. It's not like in layman's terms,
Right.
I guess.
So let me help you out here. So we have acid, you know, or and we have alkaline or base, right? And we have acid in our stomach, and our body maintains balance by having a balance between acid and base. But we know that our stomach is very acidic, right? That the fluid is acidic. And when you lose that acid, then you have an excess, even though there wasn't a lot to begin with, of the base. And alkaline is another name for base. So that's what alkalosis means. You have an excess of alkaline or base. So if acid lowers the blood pH, do you remember that on the pH scale?
So then that's why the pH increases.
Yes, that because there's an imbalance when you get rid of all that acid through long-term vomiting, because what happens with fluid balance is you're not just pulling the acid then from your gut, but from all the other cells, okay? Well, and the opposite happens because we're talking about it. If somebody has a really severe case of diarrhea, cholera, something that causes that to change, the alkaline is in the lower part of the body. And so what happens when they lose all that alkaline over time is that there's an excess of acid. So it has to do with that balance between acid and base. That we want to maintain balance, and when we lose a lot of one, then there winds up being an excess of the other. Okay. So that's why you want to try to maintain balance, which is getting the fluid back, which will help restore what's being lost. So this was a harder one, but I thought I'd throw it at you and then see if people use words they don't understand, and I just wanted to try to. I think it's interesting just because I remember, because it happened to me. So of course it's my epiphany experience, and now you all have to benefit from it. Any questions about that? Your suggestions are right in the order in terms of, you know, ice chips, small sips, worst case scenario, IV. Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say worst case because you didn't do anything wrong if you need to have an IV. It's not your fault. You know, it's not like you did anything wrong, but and why would an IV be better than drinking if you can't drink? Why does an IV work?
Because it goes directly into the blood rather than digested through the stomach.
You totally bypass the digestive tract. Okay, I'll see you in a bit. You're back?
I mean, we discussed, I mean, I'm just a little confused about one thing, Professor.
Sure.
When we we were talking about hyponatremia. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
So why might the marathon runner develop hyponatremia? So what we kind of figured out was, you know, marathon runners usually intake a lot of body fluids while they're running.
Not body fluids, just fluids.
Sorry, fluids. What am I saying? Sorry, it's just fluids. Like they hydrate themselves. And sometimes what happens is they consume a lot of fluids, and these runners, however, sometimes drink more fluids than their kidneys can excrete, causing hyponatremia. But what I didn't understand is they said that some of the symptoms of this are cramps and muscle spasms. So what I don't understand, sometimes you get cramps when you are dehydrated. I want to know how you get cramps if you're constantly hydrating yourself. Like I read somewhere that your cells swell.
Yeah. So what's happening when you develop hyponatremia is that you're replacing the fluid, but not the electrolyte. Instead of drinking Gatorade that has water and sodium and potassium, you're just drinking water. So that creates an imbalance. And at the level of the muscle tissue, even a small imbalance can cause the muscle to seize.
Oh, all right.
So it's sort of a non-specific symptom. I mean, you might get muscle spasms from anything. It doesn't mean you're dehydrated, but these are the sort of things that show up.
Got it.
Okay?
Got it.
Yeah. All right, let's see. I'm going to guess that people are done. I'm going to call, say, party's over and close rooms. What do you guys see right now? I'm not sharing my screen. Do you just see me? Is that it? That's enough. Huh? Okay, then maybe I'll put a background on. Marissa, have you folks been there where that picture was taken?
We went when we were abroad last year.
Oh, and when were you abroad?
In the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you came back before the apocalypse?
Yeah. We got lucky.
Yeah. Well, it took us a long time to get to Antarctica. Yeah. And not everybody wants to go there. It's not exactly the hot spot that people want to go to, but it's not hot at all. Let's put it that way. But
seems really cool, though.
It was extraordinary. It was absolutely extraordinary. All right, how are we doing here? There are only 2 people in the first group? What happened there? All right, group 1, are you here?
Yeah. So for the alcohol part, we said it affects the fluid balance because it's a diuretic. So it causes the body to remove fluids at like a faster rate. So it's like you need to balance it with your water intake, or else it can cause dehydration. And then Katie's gonna do coffee.
Okay, so let me tell you what I want you to know, because most of it's right. Coffee is not a diuretic. Caffeine is. Coffee is mostly water. That's why I showed you the picture of all those coffees, and that's why it was in the video. Coffee is mostly water. So the reason why you pee a lot when you drink a lot of coffee is because you drank a lot of water. Now, if you're just taking caffeine, like for NoDoz or whatever these things are that are just plain caffeine, that will be a diuretic. But I would not worry about coffee. But now there are people who say it keeps them awake. If they look at it, it keeps them. Everybody's different. Everybody reacts differently, but it is not. But coffee is not a diuretic. The thing about alcohol is that alcohol, and you don't have to, you know, this is not something I expect you to write down. If I think about it, I'll go through and I'll update the answer. Alcohol decreases a hormone that then results in you urinating more. And that's how alcohol upsets fluid balance. And the symptoms of hangover are mostly associated with dehydration. So yeah, if you want to try to maintain fluid balance, if you're out for a long evening and you want to drink, what I would have recommended to folks, you know, have an alcoholic beverage, sugar-free soda, and a glass of water. Because if you're going to be out for a long time and you want to remember, then you also don't want to get sick the next day, you want to stay hydrated. Okay, so coffee does not affect fluid balance unless you drink too much of it and then you have too much fluid, but alcohol can be dehydrating. Okay, group 2. Why might excessive vomiting cause an increase in blood pH?
I can go.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
So we talked about vomiting or nastrogastric suction generates a metabolic alkalosis by a loss of gastric secretions, which are rich in hydrochloric acid. So whenever hydrogen ion is excreted, a bicarbonate ion is gained into the extracellular space. Between the acid and the base, and when you lose that stomach acid, you now have an excess of the base, which is alkaline. Acid, we have a fire alarm.
Do you need to go?
Okay, sorry, guys.
Is that a yes or no? I guess so. Is somebody else from her group? Oh, there you are. Sarah, do you need to go? I can't tell on my little screen here. People keep. Is anybody else from the group still here?
Yeah, I can talk.
Okay.
I have a friend presenting. I have a friend presenting next to me, so that's why I didn't want to say anything earlier. But this one. So yeah, she was kind of going over how acid is what lowers the pH. Now that there's more alkaline and an imbalance between both, the blood pH increases. And then some suggestions we have for someone that can't keep drinking fluids is to start off with eating some ice chips and taking small sips of water, and then I guess like worst case scenario, do an IV so it goes directly into their bloodstream.
Okay, so yeah, what we're talking about are the fluids when one vomits, which is a pleasant, I hope you aren't eating right now. So vomiting, you're losing water from the upper part of the body. You're losing its stomach fluid, and fluid from your stomach is hydrochloric acid, is acidic. So what's left over is alkaline or base. And that's what alkalosis means, excess base. So that can cause something called excessive vomiting can cause alkalosis. And as I said when I went into the group, the opposite occurs if you have a really bad bout for a long period of time of diarrhea and you're losing fluids from the lower GI, lower intestinal tract, because that's mostly alkaline. And that leaves an excess of acid. We're talking about balance between acid and alkaline, or acid and base. And your body wants to maintain fluid and electrolyte balance. And when you lose an excess of one, then that leaves the other one. So you want to help replenish fluids, if somebody has severe vomiting, like you said, you start with ice chips or small sips of water, whatever the stomach can handle, and if necessary, intravenous fluids, because that bypasses the intestinal tract. There's no digestion that needs to go on. All right, group 3, is there a daily recommendation for water?
Yeah, so we talked about how you want to receive adequate fluid levels for health and optimal functioning. So although there's not like a set upper limit, it can vary depending on like strenuous physical activity and heat stress that would greatly increase your water needs. But one suggested recommended level is 1 milliliter per calorie. So for males eating around like 2,900 calories, that would be 2.9 liters. And for females eating around 2,200 calories, that would be 2.2 liters. But those again might not be optimal fluid intake levels. And there's no recommendation for how much water adults and children should drink daily, but it's important to recognize that it can be obtained from a variety of different foods and fluids.
Yeah, I'd like you to try to emphasize that a little bit more in your answer, that yes, the recommendation may be that, but, and I went over it in the videos, that most of the food we eat is water. If you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, that's a lot of water. Okay, even ice cream is like what, 50% water? And while I would like to recommend that as a major source of fluids, it would not be a good idea as a dietitian to recommend you get your fluid from ice cream. So, but yeah, fruits and vegetables, all these things are mostly water. So you don't need to drink 2.2 liters of water a day, as long as you are getting adequate fluid, and your coffee and your tea, your juice, all these other things count towards your fluid intake. Okay. So if you wouldn't mind adding that. All right, group 4. How come some groups had more people than, oh, I know why. All right, Kevin, what did you guys have? Wake up.
Hi, Professor, can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
So we have processed food containing more sodium. and it contains more sodium because sodium is a preservative, so it increases the shelf life of the food, and it also improves the taste and texture. And our second question is, what are our suggestions for people who loves fast food but needs to reduce their sodium intake? And one would be to avoid processed food when you have the option, or choose options with the sodium amount. And another one would be to reduce the portion size if you're eating out. And the last one would be to not add additional salt to the already processed food.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, I went over this. There was a couple of slides where I talked about what processing does is it increases the sodium content while simultaneously decreasing the potassium content. So if you go from apples to apple pie, or I don't know what the other examples on the slide were. And this is why when I talked about the DASH diet, the dietary approach to stop hypertension, the recommendation is to increase your intake of fruits and vegetables, fresh vegetables and fruits, or I should say unprocessed, because they contain more potassium and less sodium. And most of the sodium in our diet does not come from the salt shaker, but it comes from these ultra processed foods. And when you cut down on those ultra processed foods, you will increase your potassium relative to sodium. And that's something that I ask you to look at in your diet projects. I ask you to compare the amount of sodium to potassium that you get in what you've eaten over a 3-day period. And why is this important? Because it may, and the operative word is may, have an effect on your blood pressure. Okay. Group 5. How about that marathon runner in hyponatremia? Party of 2 in group 5.
Fluids. You're drinking water, energy drinks, stuff to just get something in your system while you're running. And a lot of the time, runners are drinking so much that their kidneys can't keep up by excreting, causing hyponatremia. It's also important to note that with the consumption of so much water and fluids, it actually dilutes the level of sodium in their blood for proper organ function.
Good. What happens? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you can go. I'm sorry.
So what you're doing is replacing the water, but not the electrolytes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the second part is, what does this do physiologically? And the cells begin to swell, and some of the symptoms are vomiting, nausea, headache, cramps, and muscle spasms. Right. And what's happening is that you have an increase in the fluid outside the cell relative to inside the cell. It's in a fluid and electrolyte imbalance. And those things over time can be fatal. All right, group 6.
So our question was, how might fever cause dehydration? And we said when you have a fever, you sweat more, so you're losing more fluids. And also, just because you're sick, you typically tend to drink less water because you're not feeling well, right, and maybe not eat at all, where you could get water from that. And then we would recommend that someone with the flu virus experience a prolonged fever should try to drink as much water as possible and also get their electrolytes. And if worst case scenario, an IV is if it's necessary.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Fever. Usually what happens when somebody has a flu virus, or if somebody's sick, they don't feel like eating. And if it's just going on for a couple days, that's probably fine if you're well nourished before you got sick. The important thing is to try to maintain fluid balance, is to try to keep those fluids in, whether you're vomiting or whether you have fever, to try to maintain fluid balance. It's when it becomes prolonged that you begin the risk of developing these other symptoms associated with dehydration. Now, I just want to ask a question about the salt. Does anybody know anyone who adds salt to their food before they taste it? And so, Jackie, do you know why? I'm curious. Why? Just
my dad used to, and then he had to start watching his cholesterol and all these different things. So I think you just grow up doing it or watching your parents do it, and it's a habit. But you have to be conscious of it, I guess. It's not always necessary too. Sometimes you'll find.
Well, no, I'm just wondering, yeah, because it's always been interesting to me that people will do that before they taste it. It's like, what if it was already salty? This is not a, well, maybe it is a judgment. God knows. Why am I asking? I don't know. Does anybody else know anyone who salts their food before they? Huh. Okay. Let's see. What else do I have anything else I wanted to? No. So so that's what I wanted to cover today. Now, there are other things in the in the videos that we didn't go over, but I do want you to not worry about coffee being a diuretic. That's always seems to be like an aha that people weren't aware of. So doesn't mean that you should only drink coffee and that there's nothing wrong with it. Remember, it's the dose. It's that dose. So I don't have class on Monday. Let's say I'll be here from 10 to 11 because what else am I doing? So if you have any questions, but if you want to get together before then to talk about your presentation, if you want any suggestions. And so then on Wednesday are the presentations. What we'll do, I guess, is similar to what we did for the sales pitch, is that I'll just toss, you'll take turns doing whatever it is that you're going to be doing. The papers, get them to me, I don't know, before I wake up on Thursday morning. How's that sound? So in case you are suddenly awash with new hints of brilliantness that you want to put in your papers, you'll be able to do that. I know you have lots of other work, so you'll take the time you need to do what you need to do. All right, any questions? Okay, then I will see you next Wednesday, unless you want to see me before then.